Hi, and welcome to Answers News for October the 4th, 2021. We're finally in October, which is exciting. Actually, is it October the 5th?
4th.
No.
Oh,
it is the 4th.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm getting my days all mixed up. Okay, so I'm Georgia Purdom. I'm here with Jennifer Rivera and Gabriella Haynes, and we're your host for today. And we have a wonderful studio audience joining us, so make yourselves known again. Let's hear it.
Yay! So, again, today's the three doctors here.
Yeah,
yes.
The three doctors, the three ladies. We like it when it's all three of us
right,
doing it
yeah,
together.
We have fun.
Okay, so a couple of things coming up here at the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter. We have Dia Latino, and that is just in a few weeks now. It will be October the 16th here at the Ark and October the 17th here at the Creation Museum. And we'll have special presentations in Spanish as well as some musical guests performing in Spanish and lots of cool things happening in that. Are you participating in that at all? Okay.
Yeah.
What are you doing?
I'm just going to be giving some information about geology and paleontology in Portuguese. If someone from Brazil or Portugal is here, or any country that speaks Portuguese will come. And then using a little bit of my Spanish too.
Yeah, good, great. So it's a great time to have people here and be able to, and it's really cool too, for all of the signage now, there's an app you can get that basically will translate the signage into whatever language it is that you particularly understand. So that's really neat way to be able to have everyone have a great experience at the Ark and at the museum. And we also have our Explore Days and Explore Junior going on right now. Those start with the beginning of the school year and go all throughout the school year. So I'm going to have Jennifer talk about those because she's in charge of all of those and tell us a little bit more about those.
Well, we have some amazing programs still. In fact, we have Explore Paleontology coming up, and that's still open for registration, and Dr. Gabrielle Haynes will be teaching that class, so we're excited about that. We also have many outdoor events that are open for registration. We have our Explore Outdoors, where we spend a whole day with Mr. P out at a local park just to kind of get to experience nature, and we're going to be doing some really cool balloon physics slingshot things too this year, so that'll be kind of cool. We had our Red River Gorge event coming up where we're going to be hiking with Dr. Danny Faulkner for 8 miles, and I'll be there as well. I'm super excited about that. And our spring events should hopefully be open by the end of the month, so our spring schedule will be coming out very soon. We're also going to have our very first adult-only Explore Day called Forensic Exploration. It'll be a Friday night and an all-day Saturday event where you get to solve a case study. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I may have to sign up for that.
I think you should.
I always wanted to learn those things.
So it's going to be, we're really excited about that. We've had a lot of requests for adults. They said we want to do these programs too. So it'll be our first one, and we'll see what comes after that. But
So you can find out all this information at creationmuseum.org/explore, and we will put the link there in the notes on social media or the comments so that you can see that. Okay, to start off with, we always have a funny article because the news is just like too super serious nowadays. So, Danish artist pockets museum's cash, declares it conceptual art. All right. So a Danish artist was basically loaned, being the key word here, $85,000 in cash to create a pair of artworks. It was basically a recreation, I guess, of something he had done previously, basically showing how much money someone makes in a year, a typical person makes in a year. And instead, what he ended up sending to the museum was 2 empty frames, and the title of the work was "Take the Money and Run."
And I really think we were talking about, there was an article that we did on Answers News was earlier in the year about an artist who had submitted what he called invisible artwork and had made thousands of dollars off artwork that you couldn't see, but that he could see, so he said it was there.
If I'm not mistaken, it was $100,000.
It was something like that, right?
He sold it. He sold it for $100,000. It had nothing.
There was nothing there. It was just invisible. It had a certificate of authenticity, I remember.
Right.
But this reminds me of that because you have another artist saying, well,
hey,
there's nothing there, but it's art.
That's his art.
It's art. It's just the concept. It's just the concept right there. Can't you see it?
I mean, I know
no intention
I may
of
not
paying
be
it back. That's the museum reached out to him and said, we're not a wealthy museum. Are you going to send us the $85,000 back? And he said, no, I don't have any intention on giving you the money back. So I'm not sure how you get away with that.
So they should be able to prosecute him for stealing, I'm pretty sure, because he says the work is that I took the money and I will not give it back. That's stealing. Okay. That's not a work. That is stealing.
And you know what? It's crazy. It's just like he sent the thing. He shipped the thing, 2 frames empty. Like, is it people getting crazy or what? I don't know what's...
Well, I think this is what happens when you live in a very relativistic society where truth is relative. This is the kind of stuff that starts to happen.
They're being consistent with their worldview, right? It's just being relative.
He's identifying that as art, even though the rest of us, would not identify it as art. Okay. Mathematical analysis of fruit fly wings hints at evolution's limits. Okay, so what this research involved was basically, I think they looked at, 30,000 points of comparison on these fruit fly wings of Drosophila melanogaster. They looked at 2,000 pairs of wings, which is a lot. And basically what they were trying to see was, fruit flies kind of can be somewhat, a little bit different depending on the environment that they're raised in and all. And so they wanted to see, would that be reflected in the vein structure, which is what you see there, of their wings. And what they found is that actually they're remarkably similar depending on the environments that they're raised in. Their vein structure is actually almost the same. And so they're like, well, how does that work for evolution? Because what does evolution depend on? Change, right? But yet what you're seeing is everything remaining the same. So it's kind of a problem.
Right. And when you see in entomology, when you study the veins and everything, all the characters, all the features that it could have made it different, they're not there. They're just the same. So it's just interesting because, it doesn't do anything for evolution. Poor thing. Can't do anything now.
Yep.
And they were talking about the different environments, and they said they noticed, they said based on the hinges, it's the only place they really saw some type of variation.
Some type of change.
And you can see the different categories they have here: inbred, poor diet, different things like that. But they had to keep saying, regardless of these different environments where you would expect to see changes, all they saw was strikingly similar features because they all look pretty much the same.
Because it's hard because they're saying, well, organisms need to be robust, and robust in the sense that they faithfully pass on their genetic information to the next generation. Because if you get too many changes, then the organism dies, and that's not a good thing, obviously. But at the same time, you need changes so that things can evolve, supposedly, from one kind of organism to another. So there's this sort of, paradox, so to speak, and argument, disagreement between the two. And so they can't figure out then how, they're having a hard time understanding how organisms could change if it's so robust. They even said, as flies grow into adults, they have this magical ability to correct for differences and create a very robust final form. It's not a magical ability. Why do you use terms like that in science?
Right.
Who does that, right?
Yeah.
No, it's actually supernaturally designed by God, right, to ensure the faithful passing of information from one to the next.
One thing that I thought it was interesting, and I'm talking about on the paleontological perspective, it's because they say here they're very fragile. And yes, wings are very, very fragile, but still we have them in the fossil record very, very well preserved with a lot of features that you can see. You can see the fold of the wing. You can see some hair-like structures in the wing. You can see some wrinkles in the wing, and so many structures in the wing that if it's millions of years, it would be impossible for them to still be there and you still have them.
Right.
So in a paleontological perspective, that's also, it shows that it did not take millions of years in those wings.
I like what this biologist said. He goes, I'm always curious if it's possible to build some set of principles for biology that will explain all or many of the phenomena in biology. And I'm thinking, well, we do have something.
Yeah.
And even though the Bible is not a science textbook,
Right.
it does set the foundation for how
Right.
we view and study science. And I just think we have that textbook, right? We don't need
Right.
that interpretation of it. We have
Right.
it already.
And they're wanting to use these types of, mathematical calculations and all to predict, they said, the appearances of these next species to evolve from Drosophila. All right, but it's not evolution, that's speciation, right? If you get a different species of fruit fly, that's just a different species. What they need to explain is how one kind of organism goes to a completely different kind of organism. And they don't have a mechanism to explain how you can gain novel structures, novel functions to do that, right?
Yep.
And so that's what's
Because
still
we can see
lacking.
speciation. We can observe, we can
Right.
test, we can repeat right there, because the speciation is just a variation within the kind.
Created
the
kinds, right.
created kind. And I was speaking about that. Who was here when I was speaking? That's great. They all came back, see? So that can happen, and it's not a problem at all, but that's not evolution.
Yep, definitely. Okay, Christian schools should be thoroughly Christian. Well, I can't agree more with that particular headline there. But this is about a Catholic school that basically, it's in Charlotte, I believe, North Carolina, and they had fired a gentleman there, one of their teachers, because he was going to marry a man. And obviously that goes against Catholic doctrine, and so they said, well, you can't be a teacher here because of that. But now the court have sided with the teacher because basically the Catholic school is not being Catholic enough. And so in this particular school, they actually divided subjects by secular and religious. And so this teacher was teaching what they deemed a secular subject. So he was a secular teacher, so he doesn't have to follow the Catholic doctrine because of that.
And the big problem was, too, is that there was a female teacher who went like a month later, announced also on social media that she was getting married, but she was marrying a man, and she did not get fired, right? And that was where the whole issue started, was that, well, why am I getting fired, but she's not getting fired? And it was interesting because, when they talk about, they almost made it seem like it's almost practice, right. For these schools to separate out and when they say secular subjects, they're referring to like what they would consider to be math and science and history, right, where they think you don't need to teach the Bible in those classes. But there's really no way that you can teach those without having a biblical worldview and teach it according to Christ, right, and God-honoring worldview.
And they're teaching that with their worldview, but they don't want Christian worldview to be taught.
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
And there's no such thing as secular versus like religious subjects. Everything is taught from a particular worldview, a religious worldview, whether it's a belief in God or not a belief in God, right? Both of those are religions, and they're being used to teach these subjects from that particular viewpoint.
Yeah, and I was talking today about man's word being the authority or God's word being the authority. There's only two worldview. God's is the authority or man is the authority. And that's how there's no secular thing. I mean, sometimes we use that term, but there's no secular. They're all religious.
I liked what Father Richard said at the end. He said, for any institution committed to forming students in a Christian worldview, there is simply no such thing as a secular subject. And that is so true. And having been in education for over a decade and teaching in many different schools, that was always at the heart of my teaching was I have to be able to teach from a biblical worldview. I refuse to teach if I couldn't teach from a biblical worldview because I see the importance of it and starting at that, that foundation in any subject that you're teaching, and especially science. And it reminds me of James 3:1. It says, not many of you should become teachers, for you know that we who teach will be judged with greater strictness. And I always felt that's like the theme verse for being a teacher. Yeah, it's such a tremendous responsibility as a teacher and the importance of teaching through a biblical worldview.
And it reminds us the importance, too, of, as we go in this increasingly secular world, of Christian organizations maintaining their Christian identity. That is becoming increasingly important, even in churches and everything, that we have a very strong statement of faith that is totally backed up by God's word, right? That starts with God's word as a foundation for what that organization believes. And we're really happy that Answers in Genesis does have its own Christian school. That's 12 Stones Christian Academy. They are K through 10 right now, 10th grade, and they add a year every year, so they'll be up to 12th grade here pretty soon. And it is a wonderful biblical worldview Christian school here in northern Kentucky.
In every subject.
Yeah.
Every single, even
every single subject is taught from a biblical worldview. And so if you're interested in that, we'll put the link there. It's tschristianacademy.org for more information on that, because it's a wonderful school. Okay, ancient crocodiles were not fierce meat eaters, but survived on a diet of plants, study finds. Okay, so this is a little bit older article, but it started to breed, sometimes these older articles start getting recirculated again, so we thought it was valuable to talk a little bit about it. So what they're finding is that crocodiles and alligators, things that we associate obviously with meat eating and being carnivorous, that their ancient relatives, okay, supposedly what they came from, were actually vegetarian. And so they said 3 to 6 members of the crocodile and alligator family seem to have teeth that were special for vegetarian diets, because those teeth tend to be very different from carnivore. teeth.
Herbivore. Mm-hmm.
And there was a lot of 3D modeling involved here, which I think it's fascinating that we can do that now. And we can actually take fossils and do these 3D models and get a better idea of what these teeth may have looked like. But I would like to how they talk about how complex and specialized, right, the teeth were of what they consider to be the plant-eating crocodile versus what we see in our, our omnivores today. So
they have a very different surface, and you can kind of see that on the picture here. So your very far right is the herbivore teeth, and they're very flat, and they have a lot of little surfaces on them, whereas the carnivore is the other side, and it tends to be very conical and, not as specialized, so to speak. So it could even be something where, again, according to Genesis, everything was created to be vegetarian originally, and this is sort of a quote-unquote, a degradation, basically, maybe, that's happened, that the teeth now have become less specialized, and these organisms now, these crocodiles and alligators now eat meat.
Mm-hmm.
And it talks about, too, how God put that genetic diversity in their teeth to begin with, right? Knowing, we have an all-knowing God who knew the future and that they might need that, that specialization that they could actually, as we say, form the different types of teeth.
Sometimes people come to me and they ask me about this, and I was like, but how that could have happened? And I just ask, do you have cat or dog in the house? The thing that happens when the cat or dog is sick, to stabilize their body, what they eat. Anyone has cat and dog at house? Grass. They go and get the plants, and why? Because they're good for their body, and it just shows that what the Bible says. It confirms what the Bible says. It's something that it's good, and God created them that way, and because of sin.
And there's a lot of storytelling in this article.
Right,
you pointed that out.
Right.
Yeah, they talk about how these crocodiles evolved from these supposed ancestors, along with other things that aren't crocodiles, like pterosaurs and other
bipedal things they're talking about.
And that's really one of the things that we need to be careful when reading this. There's some true, but there's also a lot of imagination, and then that's what I was talking today too, separating what is fact, what is imagination, what is the interpretation, because that's important. Because in one paper alone, sometimes in one sentence, you have something that is true, and then something that is just like nonsense.
Right. And so one of our zookeepers saw that we were doing this story today, and so she sent me a picture of an alligator. This is a monster alligator, she said. Penelope, this is at Fort Wayne's Children's Zoo, and she said they love to eat watermelon. So a friend of hers works up there, and they can be seen chowing down, right? So sharp teeth, that's what we always say too, is sharp teeth can be used for a lot more than just eating meat, right? Because you're not going to get into a watermelon with a spoon, right? I'm just saying, you're going to need something sharp. And then she sent me this little video. There he goes with the watermelon. Yeah, perfectly content with that there. That is a really big.
Who's gonna get it? Who's gonna try to get a piece of that? Huh?
Yeah,
nobody.
Yeah, I think he's gonna save that all for himself there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, so kind of funny.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, Oxford College caves to woke mob apologizes for letting Christians use campus. So this is at Worcester College, which is one of the constituent colleges of Oxford over in the UK. And basically what happened was, heaven forbid, the group Christian Concern during the summer wanted to use their facilities, which a lot of universities and colleges do because it makes money for the university. And they used the campus during the summer when the students were not there, okay? And then when the students came back, one of them actually found a flyer about this conference and started all of this, basically telling the college, hey, this was wrong of you to have this group here during the summer, even though we weren't here to be outraged by it. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just see this so much. That's happening so many times, like people apologizing because Christians were involved. I want to know when people will start apologizing for treating Christians that way.
Exactly.
Because that's not what's happening. It just, and here, even in the papers talking about that, it's starting to be, being a Christian, it's being a problem now, and people don't want you there, don't want you around, and it just see
the term that guy uses actually refers to like bad air. Like they don't even want the air of Christianity to even be left there behind from this group that was
the way
there
that we breathe
in the middle of the summer. And it's interesting because he does go into how dangerous a lot of these colleges are making it feel like to even have a debate or discussion over
They don't want
topics.
debate.
They don't want
They
debate.
just don't want a monologue.
That, like they said, even this like leading radical pro-abortionist was targeted for cancellation because she was having a debate and not a monologue. Like they don't even want you discussing ideas anymore, which is just so hard to believe.
Which is what college campuses are supposed to be.
Yeah. Well, you need to debate. You need to talk. You need to have different ideas. You have to have different points. But what's happening? They just want you to know one thing alone, and obey that and do that because they want to slave people.
And yeah, I can't, how many times have we done articles on this same news show that talk about, Christian photographers and Christian, people that design invitations for weddings and wedding venues and places that don't want to, service people in the LGBT community. And they're basically said, do it or you're out of business. But yet, heaven forbid, a Christian organization want to go on a college campus, but that's not allowed. It's a total double standard. It really is. It's, you see that, we just continue to see that over and over again. So
I did like how the author also said, he said, these systems of belief are occupying space in the lives of many of their followers, which might have otherwise have been occupied by religion. And that is just so true because it's talking about all these, woke students and they claim they're not feeling safe and they get on these agendas, but they're almost treating it like their new religion.
Yeah.
And it's filling that void in their life because they don't have that relationship with God. They don't recognize their value and worth in Him.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, single cells evolve large multicellular forms in just 2 years. And I could add a tagline to this, and they're still just yeast. Okay? So, my word. All right, so basically what they did was they put these yeast are unicellular, organisms, and they put them under a selection pressure, basically, of they would take a tube and they would shake it for a little bit, and then whatever fell to the bottom, they would take that and then they would put it in another tube, and they would do the same thing, right, over a period of, I think it was like 60 days or something like that. And they got these yeast that basically started forming, and this is like a little video of it here, forming these multicellular forms where they're aggregating together. They call them snowflake yeast because it sort of kind of looks like a snowflake. Okay, so, but they're still just yeast. Okay? They're not evolving into because for evolutionists, they have to explain how a single-celled organism evolved into people today, right? And into animals, because that's what's happened, right? And so how do you explain that? They said it happened at least 20 times in life's history. So not only do you have to explain how it happened once, but you have to explain how it happened 20 times.
They can't even explain one time. Yes, 20.
I know. So evolution got really lucky, I guess.
I mean, all through the article, every time they talk about any type of change, it's the yeast evolved. The yeast evolved over and over and over again, but the yeast just evolved into more yeast.
Yeah, which is a logical fallacy, equivocation, but they're using the word evolve to actually be what? Changing,
it's just yeast that are sticking together.
They kind of, basically all it is.
That's all it is.
Kind of, what's interesting though is you find mechanism that God put in place when yeast were under a certain, type of environmental change or a lack of oxygen, then the yeast would clump together, and almost like a survival instinct.
Right.
That's just a sign of God allowing things to survive in varying environmental conditions.
Providing a way.
They're just dealing with the environment that they're in a way that allows them to survive better, but they're still yeast. They're still just a bunch of unicellular leaves hanging out together, basically. And they even in the article talk about Richard Linsky's work, and I'm very familiar with his work. So basically, what he's done is he has cultured E. coli in his bacteria E. coli bacteria in his lab since 1988.
Oh, wow.
So a very long time, right? And he's seen changes in these bacteria. But the changes he's seen, guess what? They're still bacteria. They're still E. coli, and all they've gotten is fat and lazy. Right? That's what's happened to the bacteria because they're in an environment where everything is given to them.
Yes, so they don't even do anything.
Yeah, they've lost stuff. They haven't gained anything.
And the problem is when that happens, if you put any situation that's going to challenge, it's going to go extinct.
Yeah.
So what's happening is they're losing abilities and they're increasing the chance of getting extinct. that's what happens. There's no evolution right there. There's nothing.
Yeah.
And even like in the whole paper, just talking about evolution having like a mind, evolution having a power or something.
Evolution does this, evolution,
Evolution is a concept. Concept doesn't do anything. That's a logical fallacy again, and that's another thing that we have to be careful when we read papers. It's seeing the logical fallacies in between the lines, because they try to use this idea for you to maybe think, oh, yes, nature did that. Nature doesn't do anything. You do, a human does, but nature doesn't do anything. Evolution doesn't do anything. So that's something that we have to be aware of.
It's funny because he talks about like the 3 significant changes that he saw in the evolution of the yeast. The yeast changed. It became more elongated in its shape. The clusters became hardier, right? These are the evolutionary changes, and the branches became tangled.
Yeah. That's not
Yeah.
That's
It's
not
not
the kind of
evolution,
changes
right?
that
It's not something new.
And see, what they wanted to see was because once you get to be a multicellular organism, you have to differentiate. Like, we have a liver that does things that a liver does, and we have a brain that does things a brain does. And so that's what they want to see in these yeasts, because in order for it to become a true multicellular organism, you have to have differentiation. Guess what? They're not seeing that, okay? All they're seeing, what did we say, is a bunch of unicellular yeast hanging out together in
Having
a clump.
a good time.
Still
just having
doing
a
what
good
yeast
time.
do. So, they're
And
never...
any change that happens is just going to be the change within the genetic material of the yeast, and there's nothing adding. The only thing that's going to happen, it's probably losing abilities and losing genetic material.
Okay, newborn babies are killed in Belgium, Netherlands, but most won't call it infanticide. And so this is continuing to happen, especially over in the Netherlands and those countries. What we're seeing is these basically protocols and things that are being released to euthanize. Not only, we're not talking about abortion, okay? We're talking about, they call it euthanasia, but it's really just murder of children outside the womb, okay? Not just inside the womb, because it's a slippery slope. Because once you can justify that, it's not a far cry to justifying killing children outside the womb if they have some kind of abnormality. So what this article is talking about is what they have been doing in the Netherlands. They now want to move it. They now want to do the same type of thing in Belgium as well.
And it was interesting because they talk about, how you pronounce it, the Groningen?
Groningen protocol.
The Groningen protocol, where from what I saw, they were saying they could euthanize children from newborn up to age 1 if they said they didn't have what's called some type of viable future, bearable future.
Right.
Who defines what that means?
Right. That's very
subjective.
Say,
right.
It
doesn't say at all or define. Or
you cannot see the future of people, and you said that the new one that they had.
Yeah, so when I was researching this particular article, I found that in the Netherlands, there's actually legislation that they were proposing in 2020. I couldn't find if it had actually passed, where they were going to make it legal to euthanize children up to age 12, and then based on if you have terminal illness or not. And I guess that's solely based on the child and parent. And they said even up to age 15 and 16, they could request euthanasia with parental permission. And that's insanity.
And
yeah,
I have to. We're mom here, and it just like we all agree that it was a very, very hard article to read. A kid will come, 13 years old, come like, hey mom, I would like to die. Oh yeah, just go there. It's fine.
Yeah.
No,
I'll go with you. I'll hold your hand.
Yeah, I'll hold your hand while you die. Yeah, that's good.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I would enjoy any amount of days with my
it's
child.
Just insanity.
We're seeing it more and more in these countries, and it's not just isolated to these countries, right? What happens there is going to come over here, Canada, all those places as well, is that the age for requesting euthanasia is going down. Okay, so it used to be 18, then it went down to like 16, now it's down to like 12. So even children can request their own euthanasia, basically, their own murder. And so we're seeing that more and more. But, regardless, we say, well, who decides what is a correct quality of life or a bearable quality of life? Regardless of all that is irrelevant from a Christian worldview, because this is a human being made in the image of God, and they have a right to life because of that, right? Because of that alone, regardless of how ill they are, regardless of their quality of life, regardless of how much money or time it might take to take care of that individual, they are a human being made in the image of God, and therefore they have a right to life. And so these protocols, I always say, there's three qualifications now. When's it going to be 4, 5, and 6, and 7, 8, and 9? And it just is going to continue to expand because, again, people are sinful human beings, and when government's taking care of these things, a lot of times they want what's most economic. And we've already seen that a lot in the UK with children basically not being allowed to be kept on life support because the government doesn't want to pay anymore for their care. And so we're continuing to see things like this. So that's why it's important, again, to have that biblical worldview of that.
And the reason why we live for His glory. So as Dr. George has said, it doesn't matter how much it's going to be to keep the child alive or anything like that, to take care. We live for His glory. And that's it. So that's, as she said, it's very important to have a biblical worldview, because if you don't have a biblical worldview, we just animals, we just whatever, it's just like, what's the problem? No problem at all. Just let them die because they're just animals. And then, it's just hard to see what people talking about infanticide when it's actually murdering kids. And it's sad.
So to end, though, on a happier note, because the news can get really down, I like this one. Dinosaurs wag their tails to help them run faster. Okay. If anybody has watched Night at the Museum, we know that dinosaurs wag their tail, right? So some of you got that.
Yes.
So this is talking about T-Rex, okay? And supposedly they wagged their tails when they ran to stay balanced. That was part of why
Did they observe this? No.
Unless they watched Night at the
the thing is,
Museum,
if they had observed that, I don't know if they would observe really well, because they would run.
Right.
Yeah.
They wouldn't be observing for long, right? That's for sure. So it's all based on modeling and
Simulation
theory and programmed simulations. And the model they used to examine this was a bird.
Yep.
The movement of a bird, because they're always trying to make the connection,
With
right?
dinosaurs.
That dinosaurs evolved into the birds that we see today. So that there's a lot of that in the background of this article.
Yeah, and even the paper saying scientists found that result by playing with the simulation. I didn't know that you can play with video games and just come up with something new.
I guess so. Yeah.
I guess so.
And your simulation is only as good as the data you put into it, right? The assumptions that it's based on. If you're assuming that birds are dinosaurs, and you're using that as your basis, then it's going to be problematic. Used to be, and again, it's another story of evolution changing again because of their story about the path. Because they used to say that tails were to balance the head, because the head was really heavy, and so the tail was used to help balance like T-Rex out in that sense. But
I could see them walking and wagging their tail.
Sure.
Yeah, sure. I can.
You watched the movie, right?
Yeah, I did see the movie.
Okay, that's why.
So anyways, and they said, they want to more accurately represent them in films and on television. And I'm thinking, oh, yeah, like they add feathers to them.
Right.
And they add,
The
all
colors.
these things, right?
All the colors and the
To make
noise
them
they
more
make. Yeah, that's
bird-like.
correct.
Yeah. All right, well, we're out of time for today. So we'll see you back on Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Thanks.